Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, a rich entitled neighbor claims that he owns half of my property and moved the shared property fence to block my garage. My driveway was effectively cut in half, and now let's dive right into the story. I have seen a lot of nightmare neighbor stories going around and figured I would share my own. The neighborhood I live in is not the richest area, none of the people living here are poor by any means, but we certainly don't have the most luxurious houses and cars. Which is why it was strange when someone new moved in next door and parked 5 sport cars outside of his house and in his garage. I went over one afternoon to greet him, and I guess the cars should have been my warning sign that he was not gonna be the friendliest person. "Delivery?" he asked as he opened his door. No, I'm your neighbor. I just wanted to come and introduce myself," I replied, extending my hand. "Delivery's in the back." He called over my head to someone in the distance and then looked at my extended hand and shut the door. I stood in a confused trance for a moment before composing myself and going back to my house. I don't usually spend much time with my neighbors anyway, and there was no obligation to become friends with him or anything, so I was not really bothered by his behavior at the time. But I probably should have seen it as a warning that there would be other bumps in the road. "Open the door," I heard at 6 AM one morning, accompanied by heavy knocking. "Hello?" I asked hesitantly as I partially opened my door, not removing the chain lock. "I need more space for my cars. Looking at the state of your house, I cannot imagine you will ever use all this driveway. I'm gonna have to remove this fence and park the rest here," he stated before turning around and walking away. "What? No, you cannot do that. This driveway is my property," I responded, following him out in my dressing gown. He continued to ignore me and walk away, and I just stood there looking after him, filled with confusion. There's no way he thinks that's just a normal thing to do. The next day when I woke up and was trying to head to work, I saw that one of his cars was plonked right in the middle of my driveway, blocking my car in. "Please move your car, you cannot park it on my property," I said once my neighbor opened his door, after I had stormed over and began banging on it. "What? Why would I do that? That car is probably worth 5 years of your salary. I'm not moving it." He looked genuinely flabbergasted at my request. "What kind of logic is that? I don't care how much money you wasted on it. Move it from my driveway." I was beginning to feel my temper flare at this point. "Wasted? What?" He stuttered out some garble of nonsense before slamming the door in my face. After 10 minutes I realized he was not coming to move his car and decided to call a tow company and had it towed away. "Excuse me? You cannot have my car towed," he yelled as he saw the truck pulling away with his car attached. "Why not? It was on my property," I replied with a shrug and went back inside. I was left with a sour taste in my mouth after this strange encounter. I was not sure if towing his car would be enough to make him stop. He can obviously afford the fee to have it removed from the compound, and I wouldn't be surprised if he hasn't already bribed them to never answer the phone from my number or something like that. However, what happened next was certainly the last item on my list of predictions. I heard a knock at the door one morning and opened it to see a fairly young man dressed in a suit, and he was holding a clipboard. "Hello sir, I'm the property surveyor responsible for this neighborhood, and your property is due for its survey. I don't need to enter your home or anything, just walk around the perimeter and ensure everything is up to date." The man handed me some legit looking identification, so I decided to agree and let him do what he needed. I watched from the window as he walked around my property with a tape measure and noted things down on his clipboard. 20 minutes later he was finished and came up to my door again. "Well, almost everything is in check," he stated as he looked over his clipboard. "Almost?" I quizzed. "Your fence extends the perimeter of your property," the man stated, looking up from his clipboard. "What?" I asked. "Other than the house, the grounds you bought don't extend as far as your fence is extended." "We will have to send someone around to move the fence to the actual perimeter of your grounds," he explained, handing me a slip of paper that confirmed everything he had just said to me. After a brief conversation about when this would all happen, with the answer being, "It has to be as soon as possible, maybe tomorrow," the man went on his way and I went back inside to carry on being puzzled about the situation. I had assumed that the fence would be moved by a few inches at most and did not really give it much thought. However, the following day when I returned home from work, I saw that said fence had been moved at least 5 meters and was now in the same position as before, only it started right in the middle of my driveway, blocking the access to my garage by being bang smack in the middle of it. This was already enough of a shock to have me slam on the brakes, but when I saw what was now in the area where the fence used to be, I nearly had a heart attack. Placed right across half of my driveway, the area that was supposedly not mine was 2 sports cars which undoubtedly belonged to my neighbor. Parking my car on the curb, I stormed over and started banging on his door. "What have you done?" I all but yelled when the door swung open. "What?" I simply looked over the property information I had bought and realized your fence extended into my grounds. I had to call a property surveyor to check it out. He shrugged, but I could see a small glint in his eye and knew something was amiss. I turned around and stormed back to my house, resisting the urge to kick one of his cars on the way. On the paper I was given by the property surveyor was a phone number which I called up immediately. A woman answered the phone and she had absolutely no idea what I was on about, and that's when I knew I had been set up. I was relieved, to be honest, because I knew it meant there were no legit legal restrictions keeping my fence in the middle of my driveway. I called the cops and explained the situation, who said they would send officers as well as property lawyer to help me sort this out. I got all my paperwork sorted in preparation and waited for the group to arrive to help me sort this all out. After looking over my documents, the lawyer informed me of what options I had and which would be the best, and the police allowed me to start a case with them. They also informed me that they couldn't force him to pay to move the fence back and advised me to sue, which I did so. Here is how it turned out. Your Honor, I think it's simply ridiculous that this lowlife would need all the space on his driveway. He only has one car, my neighbor called up to the judge when he realized he was quickly losing the case. The judge, not impressed, looking down her nose at him, and took a moment to decide his fate. $3,000 fine to pay for a brand new fence and remove the old one. Also 100 hours of community service so you can hopefully learn to be humble. And finally, you will be moved from your current residency. The judge stated, and just before she banged her gavel, my neighbor began screaming a long list of expletives at her. "Get a warrant for a full background check and search of this man," the judge concluded, looking over towards the officers standing in the corner, and then finally banged the gavel. My neighbor went suspiciously quiet, and after the results of said background check came back, he was locked away with a 45-year sentence. It turns out he had been running a very highly organized drug cartel across the entire state, hiring minors internationally to sell said drugs. All his assets were also seized because it was overturned that he had never paid taxes since the age of 26. Safe to say, I'm pleased with the punishment he got, and I hope I never have to deal with him again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much, and now let's continue with the next revenge story. Many years ago, I used to work nights and shared a cubicle workspace with someone who worked days. We will call her Karen. Karen apparently thought the entire cubicle belonged to her and nobody was allowed to sit there, everything was labeled with her name, and she would lock the desk. I had to get a separate file cabinet just so I could store my files and stuff, as she was not willing to share. She had little knickknacks figures all over the desk in inconvenient areas that made it difficult to work, so I would simply move them to the monitor's stand out of the way. I'm short and she is tall. I would adjust the seat, monitor and phone to be comfortable. I hated feeling like a little kid with my feet dangling. Fast forward a few weeks of doing the routine of moving the figures and adjusting the workspace for my use. I come in and there is an 11 by 14 piece of paper taped to the monitor with an aggressive note. "Night person, don't move my stuff. It's not yours to touch, and stop adjusting the seat and monitor because it's not ergonomically correct." I showed my manager the letter and how the desk was when I came in, and then again after adjusting it to my needs. He laughed and said that she is crazy, continue to adjust it to better suit your needs, and she can do the same when she comes in. So cue the petty revenge. I started moving everything into random configurations daily for a couple of weeks. Monitor in front of desk and everything behind it stacked up like a pyramid, unplugged phone from base and put the mouse in its place, left seat upside down, etc. I recruited coworkers to get in on the fun, helping to redesign each new layout. It reminded me of what Jim used to do to the Dwight in The Office. We didn't go as far as putting her stapler in jello though. My friend worked days 2 cubicles over, conveniently next to the manager's office, and said Karen would stomp past her every day to complain to the manager about the night person who was destroying her stuff and making it difficult to work. She also conveniently left out the fact that she had left a note starting this whole petty revenge. After about a week of her complaining, the manager asked if anything was missing or broken, and she said well no, but tired of her BS, they cut her off and said to simply readjust to her needs and only come to them if anything was vandalized. It was fun to hear from my friend how hot and bothered she was not knowing what she would find each morning. I never saw another note from her, but about a year later, she was voluntold to move to nights. She was telling a few of us about the situation, of course, playing the victim, and asked if we had any idea who it could have been. The cubicle was empty because I had promoted and no longer sat at her desk by this time. I guess she expected the person, aka me, to get thrown under the bus because the day crew was cutthroat. Little did she know the night crew was ride or die. We all played dumb and started laughing the second she walked outside. And no, the cubicle doesn't belong to you, others are allowed to use it and adjust items accordingly, you entitled Karen. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I would probably go crazy if I had to work in such an environment, especially when you are right next to an entitled Karen that you have to endure daily. Respect to anyone who has to deal with such a situation. Either way, the next one is another revenge story. So I was working at a bar that had caught fire and burned to the ground. It was going to open in a few months at a new location, but my unemployment checks were not big enough to keep me in rent payments and food, so I took a job at McDonald's to make ends meet. I was in my early 30s at the time, and most of my coworkers on the second shift were in high school. The high school kids thought they were hot crap and enjoyed giving orders to me to do the menial jobs in the kitchen. There was one kid, let's call him Mark, who thought he was the king of the kitchen. He would order me to clean the grills at the end of the night, or to change the oil in the fryers, or to clean out the shake machine. He was around 17, had worked there for about a year and a half, and was the cousin of Annie, the second shift manager. He thought he could get away with anything, and I guess he was right. One night there was very little business and the kitchen was at a standstill. Mark came over with a spray bottle and instructed me to go and water the plants in the seating area. I took the bottle and walked out from behind the counter to the plants, which I noticed from about 3 feet away were plastic. I headed outside and smoked a cigarette, fuming at the asinine behavior of this entitled little prick. By the time I finished my cigarette, I had a plan to get even. I walked back inside, washed my hands, got the ice bucket and a whisk. I walked over to Mark and said, "Annie said that the ice machine is broken, but we need more ice. Take this bucket, fill it with water, and take it to the walk-in cooler and stir it with the whisk until you get ice." Mark looked at me for a moment with a confused expression on his face. "Annie's right over there if you want to ask her." "It's your choice to question the order of a manager." Mark took the tools and did as he was instructed. About an hour after he entered the walk-in, Annie came over and asked for volunteers to leave early because business was so slow. "Where is Mark?" she asked, and when I answered her, she looked dumbfounded. "He is in the cooler making ice." I smiled broadly at her as I said it. She stepped over to the walk-in and opened the door. Most of the kitchen crew followed her, and when the door was opened, they saw Mark sitting on an overturned milk crate, carefully stirring the bucket of water with the whisk. He looked up and said, "I might have to go to the freezer. The cooler is not cold enough to get the water to freeze." The explosion of laughter that followed was heartwarming. For weeks, people would put a whisk at Mark's workstation. The gag became a standard hazing practice for new people training in the kitchen. Mark then eventually quit because he said he was not getting enough respect in the kitchen, but by that time I was back to work at the bar. I had a new respect for people working fast food restaurants, the ones that put up with a lot of crap behind the scenes, and I never complained about the time it takes to get an order up anymore. They do the best they can. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. So this story starts with me and my company. I'm a 30-year-old businesswoman who works in an IT service in a bank space. I'm the girl for everything basically, but I'm a specialist for first-level support, administration and backup, and sometimes even networking. Even when I'm not the head of my IT department, I basically had all the responsibilities of them, but unfortunately my pay grade doesn't reflect that at all. I think of my boss of my IT department as kind of lazy, if not incompetent. He even brags about getting so much money for basically doing nothing. I got a 40-hour week, but since the whole IT department is my responsibility, I need to keep track of the servers and maybe problems that can occur 24/7. This is mostly done via emails. So when the server status gives out a warning or a failure, I will get notified, and then I am fixing the problem over remote desktop or going to the company itself, even in my free time. I wouldn't mind this, but I'm not getting paid for this, but on the other hand, I'm getting punished when something is going wrong. My boss's boss was not that much better. Since it was a fancy bank, everyone should be in a suit the whole time. To let it look professional, best with a skirt and high heels. The only problem is, when you work in the first level support, you need to do a lot of the behind the scenes work, like slipping under the desk to do or repair cable management, doing work on the server rack, and doing lots of other activities that make you dirty. You can imagine that this worn out my business clothes really fast, and not only that, they were so impractical and really made my work harder. So then I changed my clothes to a comfy hoodie and work pants to fit the work I'm doing a bit better. When my boss saw me, he was furious, demanded I cannot look like a poor hobo inside his bank. I told him that I demand work clothes for both occasions because they are expensive and get worn out quickly. He refused, and I was not really happy about this. So much for the instruction. Someday my boss's boss, head of the whole company, called me. He had a plan. He wanted to create quiet hours, means he didn't want his employees working on weekends to let them rest properly. At first glance you could say, hey, that's a nice idea. Yeah. No, he didn't like to pay them for overwork because he got in some legal trouble with overwork paying in general. Not only that, some employees have strict deadlines and need the extra time to get work done. To actively ensure nobody cannot work over the weekend, he wanted the following. Please make sure no one can access their emails and remote desktop over the weekend. No exceptions. Since we had a ticket system and be able to attach emails to tickets, I asked him to write an official work task. This has two reasons. First, I like everything documented. Second, I have a something to protect and secure myself if the task I was given is incorrect, and it's exactly this that saved me. So I was in my office desk again thinking how to get the task done and what implication it will have, and then it was clear to me what it meant. The email came from my boss with the task, and indeed he wrote, "For everyone, no exceptions." I was thinking to myself, should I write them, the implications it would have? After thinking, I thought of how I am treated as a worker, and I decided against it. I was working immediately at this task and made an automated process to block every access to emails after Friday 6 p.m. to Monday 6 a.m. Weekend came and it was Saturday, and I was calm, relaxed, because if you have not noticed by now, by cutting down everyone's emails, it means of course that I don't receive any updates on the servers. I cannot possibly work on it because my remote access is also cut, of course. And if you think you could forward your work email address to your private one, no, I cannot, because we have a very strict data protection. Nothing is allowed to go out. I am happy. It is still Saturday, middle of the day. I'm cooking myself and my husband a nice meal, and my telephone rings. It's my boss's boss. He talks with a stressed voice and told me that he cannot access his emails. I needed a second to process this, but I responded, that does not surprise me at all, since you ordered me to cut everyone's email access without exceptions. He was angry, very angry, and told me that this obviously does not count for him. I told him that he specifically told me that there are no exceptions, and he stated everyone, and he then argued that this was not how he phrased it, so I reread him his own email. After that he was silent for a moment, and he noticed his flaw in his logic. I broke the silence and asked him, "Sir, if you still want access to your emails on the weekend, that's no problem. Please send me a request per email and I work on first thing on Monday." A bit angry again, he replied that he wants to have it done immediately, and I calmly explained to him that I cannot do this since my remote access is also blocked like he ordered. He hung up. 10 minutes later he calls me again. He asks me calmly if I can fix the problem right now when he pays me for my overwork. He also wants me to be available at any time, means I should receive my emails and be able to do remote work, and that this will raise my pay grade by a lot. I thought that this is the perfect opportunity. I agreed to that condition and pay raise, but only when my coworkers and I finally get work close, and he agreed. Since then, my work situation drastically improved, and mostly only because I maliciously complied, well aware of the consequences of the given task. And yeah, Ripe Stars, that's probably the perfect example for malicious compliance, and also the ways in which malicious compliance can help you to make a better work environment, not only for yourself but also for your co-workers. Props to OP. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. It starts like this. So my folks decided to host a barbecue because I guess that's what older people do. I declined because I really don't like my two sisters, their husbands or their kids. Wife and I are child-free. Mom then pressured the wife. Long story short, we went. By the time we arrived, there were about 20 people there. My sisters and their husbands were already solidly buzzed. Drunk really. My mom was spending 100% of her time trying to keep the nieces and nephews ages 7 to 11 more or less under control. My dad had strategically retreated to the whirlpool part of the pool with a small cooler full of beers. Wife and I made small talk with miscellaneous people, ate food and had a frozen margarita. Sisters and brother-in-laws took turns criticizing us for being late, not being in our swimsuits and screwing up the vibe. Whatever, typical suburban summer get-together. About 45 minutes in, two of the kids ran at one of the neighbor guests who was standing next to the pool and pushed her in. She was at the pool steps, stumbled in, but didn't fall, so only got half wet. She was clearly very unhappy about it, but she didn't make a scene. She just went over to where the parents were, grabbed their towels, dried herself off, and left. Sisters and brother-in-laws thought it was all great fun. A bit later, I was standing a few feet away from the pool, chatting away with someone. I saw three of the kids running full tilt at me from the corner of my eye. Obviously, I was next. Not that it is terribly difficult to outwit young kids, but I just jumped out of their way at the last second. All three of them ran straight into the pool at full speed. Most of the other guests, including my wife and me, started laughing, but their moms, who as I mentioned, were pretty crab-faced, absolutely freaked out. Apparently, two of the kids couldn't swim, even though they were in swimsuits. So, since I was not in swim gear, I stepped back from the pool and let other people fish the kids out. The kids were bawling their heads off like they had lost a limb. At that point, all hell broke loose. The four drunk parents were yelling at everyone in general, and me in particular, for letting their kids drown, and also because two of the kids had been videoing the trick using their parents' iPhones, which were now at the bottom of the pool. One of my brother-in-laws got into the pool to try and retrieve the phones, but his BMI and BAC made that impossible. No one else volunteered to help, unsurprisingly, given that my sisters were still complaining at everyone. I told my sisters it was their job to watch their kids and that if anything had happened to them, it would have been their responsibility, not mine. There were some pretty strong words on both sides. Wife and I left after the other brother-in-law fell over and face-planted while yelling at us. Now they are saying that I should have let the little crapheads knock me into the pool and have their fun and ruin my phone. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this. Do you think that OP is the a-hole or not? Personally, I would say that OP is definitely not the a-hole. He's not obligated to get pushed into the pool and get his phone ruined just so these kids that obviously don't have very good parents have their fun. Either way, a comment on Reddit said, not the a-hole, the kids FAFO, whatever that means. If the parents' phones got ruined in the process, that's on them for not controlling their little hellions. I can see why you avoid family get-togethers. Hopefully next time your wife won't allow herself to be guilted into making you go. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, talk about raising your kids to be disrespectful a-holes and being irresponsible parents. Honestly, what kind of parents get crap-faced when their children are playing in and around a damn pool? Especially when they know that their kids cannot swim. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, that's a very good point I didn't even think about. What would you have done in that situation, considering that these kids probably cannot swim and their parents clearly cannot pay attention to them because they are so drunk? Would you have maybe even called CPS later on? Let us know in the comment. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.